Yes, good.
On.
Actually, you know what? I'm just
up
going to
here.
give us a little bit more breathing room here. Can you see if I would have space now to be? Is everybody on camera there?
Eric, I want to give you a sticker for your badge.
Awesome.
And every now, this is all you have
All
to
right,
do.
that's good.
You're already doing it.
Okay, so
Is it live right now?
it is absolutely live right now. This is the Datapalooza unofficial, but only stream. We are doing this in order to provide patients with some free content. Probably a little bit too relaxed at this point.
Yes.
I'm going to actually. That's well. I mean, I'm just. I've had so many great conversations that I'm a little bit frazzled, and I'm caring less about the formality of what you're supposed to do on these things. So, hi, streamers. Eric works for Consumer Checkbook, and is you guys have a VRDC seat now, right?
We do.
Doing some really interesting things inside for claims analysis.
Yes.
And I would love if you just, before I hand it over to Nick, who wants to talk about something about pediatric mental health, and talk about some of the things that Niall's back on to chat about. That seems like it's going to be a conversation, but if you could go real quick and just kind of tell us the interesting things you're working on.
Sure. Yeah. So for those who don't know our global domination of Checkbook, we're actually a small nonprofit, and our thing is to do insurance plan choice and provider evaluation as part of the larger mission of helping people choose service providers. So that when you look at that, the out-of-pocket cost thing, we've been doing it for a long time. Lots of other people do it, but it's actually a little hard for consumers to understand and make sense of. So really, the level that we're trying to drive to is what is the actionable decision that the consumer faces right now. And so maybe we'll get to talk about it later on, but I have a little bit of a contrarian view of quality and price transparency in that everybody likes contrarian views when they do an interview, right?
I love contrarian interviews.
In that I think it's not yet fully aligned to the way that people are experiencing their healthcare. So we're trying to dig down really deep to the point where like you're in the episode, right? I think we all know that the episode is where people are really living. You're in the episode. What's the information you need to make a better choice? Not necessarily like a big list of things that you could choose, but things that are in your scope.
One thing is that I'm trying to do a good job on the stream of telling people what, because my conversations tend to be way too wonky.
Yeah, maybe I'm
say what you mean by an episode, because I think everything else was follower by a layperson.
Okay, great. So an episode of care is, as I understand it, basically from the time you have a problem to the time that you either solve the problem or achieve some sort of stable state where you're managing it and you're kind of dealing with it in a stable way. The great thing about an episode, or you're dead. True. But the good thing about an episode of care for those of us who are trying to figure out how to make the health system more simple and approachable is it really is the patient's eye view of what happens. So when you go to a hospital, that may or may not have been the solution to your problem. It almost certainly wasn't the start of your problem. And so a well-defined episode of care really tracks with the patient's experience in a way that a visit or something else might not.
Brilliant. So I just want to point out again, Niall Brennan is old hat. He was on a stream previously. I'm not going to make him introduce himself again. He's awesome. He's
old
amazing.
Hat? Yeah. I'm not even wearing a hat.
You're not even wearing a hat. But he's been on the stream, so I'm not going to introduce him. I would just like to pinpoint that Consumers Checkbook is one of the organizations.
By the way, is this Bob Krughoff, Consumers Checkbook?
That's right. So
oh my God, I didn't know. That guy's my hero.
Yeah, and I will say, just for anybody who knows him, unfortunately, he's really not doing well right now.
Oh.
So I think it's worth tracking through a few things that he was a total pioneer in, maybe for the benefit of the stream. Robert had the idea in the 70s that you ought to be able to choose from different service providers in an educated way. And he applied that to healthcare at a time when that was just absolute heresy. Like really, doctors stood between mortals and gods. And if you dared to ask whether they were better than one another, you were going to be cast out. And he really fought that good fight for decades before anybody else did, including he loves to tell stories about how he used to take CMS publications and cut them out with an X-Acto knife and put them together into new tables. That was sort of like...
Dude's a legend.
Yeah,
he's a legend.
He used to like show up to meetings for me with his socks tucked into his pants because he biked everywhere.
Right.
I love that guy.
Yeah, and he now you probably know this history better than I do, but he, in the early 2000s, he launched a FOIA suit, the theory of which was, why can't I retrieve data from Medicare and produce NPI-identified evaluations of surgeons in this case? And he fought.
In many respects, the work. I'm so glad I came back upstairs.
No, I know.
In many respects, the work that Bob advocated for was the
kernel,
the tinder for what we ended up with the
public use files.
Public
The
use files,
physician
also the
files,
DotGraph stuff,
the
all of that
Miami,
was based on
the
his
Florida
stuff.
injunction that
Yep.
prohibited the release of that
It
information,
was all him.
and then eventually,
And it was the Florida.
I'll be right back.
He was the Florida injunction, wasn't he?
Yes, he was the Florida. I mean,
Yeah.
it was and he had a unique talent that he could really charm the white shoe lawyers in Washington, and he got a number of them working on his behalf to file those suits. He got, I don't know if you all know this history, but it's good for the stream people to know. He got Secretary of Everything, George Shultz, to write an op-ed with him. He got Arnie Milstein to write an op-ed with him. I mean, he really just had this talent for showing up and getting people to sort of listen to something that they hadn't thought about before in terms of consumers and approaching healthcare and shopping for value. Anything.
Can I get just his email if it's
Yeah.
appropriate, just to like, not now, later, but like just to send him a note?
Yeah, you'll need
same.
his wife's email. His
Yeah.
husband,
Oh, okay.
he's not,
Okay.
but
Okay.
email Gail, absolutely no.
yeah.
But anyways,
Is he in town?
he is on Capitol Hill, actually.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but I just will have to show sad news. He's in hospice. So,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm actually really glad to get a chance. I mean, I feel like we at Checkbook live his legacy. You know, it was, I mean, surveying, and he did all kinds of crazy stuff. He's also, as you said, kind of a character. So he surveyed hospital chaplains to figure out about the quality of care. He surveyed nurses about doctors. He did something that I actually was just talking to one of the panelists today, surveying doctors about other doctors. Who's a good doctor? You want to know, we all know, you ask your doctor friends who's in whose hands you should be and in whose hands you should not be. He turned that into a survey called Top Doctors. Did it for years. You know, declining response rates have meant that that's not necessarily viable anymore. But I think that those kind of ideas, that kind of creativity, just amazing. So I'm really glad to get a chance to sort of represent all the things that he's done. I came latecomer to that, obviously.
Yeah, and give me a good link. There's got to be some link that Checkwood has about his work that I can put on the show notes for people to go find out more.
You know, there's a lot of news pieces about him, and I will find one. As you're saying
Does he
that,
have a Wikipedia page? Because he's
as
such a
you're
significant
saying
enough person
that,
that he
I
probably
would.
should.
I think either I should do that, or I will get the rest of our
Come in and join
folks
us
on Checkbook to try to put some of those things up, because really
There you go.
I mean, you know, he could drive you nuts too. He would get obsessed with things, which is, I think, the hallmark of somebody who really is onto something. And, you know, just a lot of the stuff that we talk about now in terms of even shopping for doctors in that way, he was 20 years ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah.
So so I can say that at Checkbook, he was a lawyer and not an economist or a data scientist, and therefore we've been doing some plumbing work to get to the more data oriented world. But anyway, so
Does this have
but
everybody in the
Fred,
picture?
I will definitely talk to the folks at Checkbook about getting something up there.
Good. Thank you. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Does now have everybody in the picture?
I can
Now,
leave this
I
way.
mean, thank you. Do lean that way. All right. Okay. Briefly, would you introduce yourself and just say USDS is hiring?
Yep. So is it that camera over there?
That's the one over there. The one I was
Okay.
just messing with.
My name is Remy DeCosmaker. I'm the newly minted open source lead over at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the digital service.
And
We are hiring, particularly in data science. At the GS13 level, I believe we're going to be recruiting soon. My team sent me up here to let people know. There's an email address, digitalservice@cms.hhs.gov. It's an email address that people can send interest and find out more
Cool.
details.
And I should mention for the camera that you neither have you don't endorse what anyone else says, and you're a government employee and blah 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 blah. You're not speaking for anyone and all those kind of things.
Views expressed are solely those.
Yeah, exactly. Nick, you had this interesting pitch when you came in. Now's the time.
No, so Niall and I were talking downstairs, and we said, well, let's get on a call next week and put our minds together on some ideas that he's working on and some things that are happening at Pink Sox Life right now that I think have some synchronicity. And I thought, well, instead of doing the call,
Let's
just
do it live,
let's
baby.
go right now, man. And
We're doing it live.
we don't have to worry about our calendars.
These ideas moving back and forth.
Right?
And
And so we're
gonna go full Bill O'Reilly here.
Yeah, we're just gonna chat out loud here, and so to Remy and Eric. Just a little bit, I don't know what you know about Pink Socks Life, but it's a 501c3 nonprofit. We accidentally started a global movement about spreading love and kindness 8 years ago, hymns 2015. So we're about to have our 8th birthday in Chicago again. These pink socks that you see people wearing around, or the stickers and other paraphernalia that have pink socks and the mustache. Boom, just like
There
that.
you go.
Yeah.
All right, here's your pair.
Yeah, look at that.
Here's your pair if you'd like.
So welcome to the Pink Socks
All right,
Tribe.
thank you.
The label on the sock says, "The world is full of good. When you believe it, you see it. Keep doing that."
Yeah.
And so the world is full of good, and it's good to see you guys. And the puzzle piece represents the power of connection. Every time you wear those, you're going to connect with people new. And had you not been wearing those pink socks, the two of you would have missed each other. So when someone says, "Hey, those are fun. Those are funky. Those are cool," that's the universe tapping you on the shoulder, saying, "Get off your phone. Stay on the train. Now stop. Introduce yourself. Just connect." That's
Cool.
We're all in this together. And it is all around the world. And I'll tell you what I've learned through the years, and I say every time, is we cannot always control governments and politics, but what we can control is how we interact with people, one person at a time, one smile at a time, one pair of pink socks at a time. So don't miss those opportunities. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you're going to create smiles every time you wear them. So that's the gift that keeps on giving. So thank you, Remy. Yeah. Pink Socks Now is a 501c3 nonprofit. We incorporated in 2019. We got our status in 2020. Just to kind of tell you how that happened was in 2000, before we were just tripping around conferences, having fun, creating smiles, giving away pink socks. It's all built on this ethos of gifting. And, we'd rally back at every conference and, see people across the room. And then it becomes this fun thing, and we get together and go have drinks, and everybody's a hugger, and since it's built on a gifting ethos,
It's possible also that you're a hugger,
I am a hugger,
and that you therefore assume that everyone else is a
Everyone else
hugger.
is the hug.
It may be possible. I was going to say,
the huggy.
I'm just
always
letting you
ask.
know.
And I would tell people, say it's always best to ask, "Are you a hugger?" before you go in for the hug.
Yeah.
And
But,
99% of the time, people say yes.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who would say, "No, I'm not a hugger," if they had to think about it, but had been hugged so pleasantly by you and your hugging thing that you've converted them quickly
they're hug
to
friendly.
being a hug friendly person.
Yeah. Well,
So it's possible. It's possible.
It is possible.
It may be possible that I'm not a hugger, and yet I've hugged
The
you many
Danes
times.
even invented a word for it. Who good?
Yes.
So we've today we've gifted over 200,000 pairs of pink socks. It's all built around this ethos of gifting. So they're not swag, you're not earned or not an award or a reward. Someone gave them to you, just like Fred just gifted you your pink socks. So you'll always have this relationship bond that Fred once upon a time gifted you these socks, and you'll remember and you'll look back and say, "Oh yeah, that was in 2023 in Washington, Datapalooza." So you have that connection, and you'll meet people throughout the years of the things, and they're going to say, "Where did you get those?" And so you always come back to this. So it's good. That ethos of gifting also, there are no douchebags in the Pink Socks Tribe, right? Because you don't really go ahead and give these to people who are douchebags. And so everybody that you're going to
I'll see
find,
myself out.
and with the exclusion of now, for the most part, are very nice, kind people that are doing really good things in the world and in their communities and their organizations. So it's the like attracts like model. Yeah. In 2019, we really kind of jumped out of the conference world. And how that happened was a first grade teacher, Miss Blancas in El Paso, Texas, posted a video on Facebook that went viral of her and her little first graders at the end of the school day. She would line her kids up at the door of the classroom, and one of the kids, they'd take turns each day. One of the kids would stand in the front, and as they exited, they would choose whether they wanted a high five, a handshake, a hug, or a fist bump as their exit for the day. Mm-hmm. And most of the kids chose the hug. So you see these little first graders in El Paso, Texas. It's a bilingual school right on the border. Just adorable, cute little kids. And you got to think, 2019, a lot of stuff in the world is kind of circling down the drain. So it's nice to see some happy, smiley kids. It's always fun to see happy, smiley adults in their pink socks, but it became even more special and more needed to celebrate some kids doing kind things. So her video went viral, and a guy in the Pink Socks Tribe named Larry Joya in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he works for PwC, He saw that video, and he sent Miss Blancas a pair of pink socks. So he gifted her pink socks because he thought, wow, you're really doing a great job teaching these kids to be kind, and watching them hug is just adorable. She received her pink socks. She made a post with the pink socks and used the hashtag, and that's when I saw her. And I was like, oh, that's adorable. And she started posting pictures of her in the classroom and the kids with her and her pink socks. And I was like, oh, man. So I reached out to her and said, how many pairs of pink socks do you need for your whole class? And so we sent her 32 pairs of pink socks. I know I'm telling you the whole story, but it's important to what I want to talk. This is the lead up to what I want to talk to Niall about. So we sent her 32 pairs. Great. Now there's the whole class of first graders. Adorable. So now we're really having fun on Twitter and celebrating kindness. At the end of that school year, I said, listen, when the kids come back from summer break and they're now second graders, let's get with the second grade teacher. I'm going to send her enough for your new first graders and have the second graders gift the first graders their pink socks. And there's something magical about gifting that creates this relationship bond. That's nice. So it's not like, oh, I got this from, some old people gave us some pink socks. No, once upon a time, she gave me these pink socks, and just like you got your pink socks. So we did that. Now we got a second grade class, a first grade class, double the fun and double the joy on Twitter. And then a week later, after they received their pink socks, there was a shooting in El Paso at a Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that Walmart was in the neighborhood where the school is, and it was really 0 degrees of separation. Everyone at the school was affected by someone who had been killed at the Walmart. So how do you go from the world is full of good, right? The label on the socks. How do you're helping teachers teach that message that the world is full of good, and then something awful happens. To go from this happy to oh God, it's tragedy. And so I reached out to Miss Blancas. I said, would you put me in contact with your school principal? So I called the school principal, Miss Chavez, and said, how many pairs of pink socks would it take for the whole school? Dr. Sue Ashok Elementary in El Paso, Texas, the Socorro Independent School District. How many pairs? Pre-K through 5. I want kids, teachers, cafeteria workers, you and your staff, coaches, security guards, everybody. So in November of 2019, we went to El Paso, and they had a kindness pep rally. We gifted 1,337 pairs of pink socks to the whole school. It happened to be Miss Blancas' birthday that day that we were there. So we got all the kids in pink socks singing happy birthday to Miss Blancas. And it was adorable, right? So that was November of 2019. Now we've got a whole school that, it's, crudgy, people like Niall are being happy and seeing happy kids and tweeting. It's like, yeah, so if we can make him smile, we can make anybody smile. So it was really working, seeing a whole school of these kids. And now we go into 2020. Ooh, now the world, starts to change because of the virus. And so as we slip into a new life, we made pink socks masks that match the socks, and we shipped those out. And a lot of the schools are starting to go virtual. And but this school, a lot of these kids in public school system, they rely on going to school to have breakfast. Mm-hmm. They rely on going to school to have lunch. And so it was optional. You could stay home, and if you couldn't stay home, great, come to school. We're still going to have staff, teachers, and have people here for you. So it's kind of a hybrid model. So we kept sending new socks for the new students for that spring semester. So we move into the fall of that year. And if you remember, in the fall of 2020, the virus is really on fire. Our first grade teacher, Miss Blancas, she gets COVID. And so a year later, so November of 19, we're there. In November of 20, Miss Blancas is in the hospital in El Paso. She's in the ICU. She has her 35th birthday in the ICU. On December the 28th of 2020, Miss Blancas died in the hospital. And I can tell you, I think about that every day. I still do. She's part of my morning meditation. I'm grateful for, she taught those kids about kindness and empathy and connection and compassion, cooperation, inclusion, diversity, not bullying each other. Teach those things at first graders. And now she's gone, and her family live streamed the funeral service on Facebook, and to be sitting at home watching her dad and her brother, and the pallbearers all in pink socks, and the girls with pink flowers, and it, I remember watching that, just weeping. And so the local media in El Paso picked up the story of her death from COVID, and also that she was using these pink socks to teach kids about kindness. The national media picked it up. The international media picked it up. And by the end of January, is the next month, we had over 20 schools from around the country that have reached out to us and said, we'd like to have pink socks at our school to help teach about kindness, to continue the legacy of Ms. Blancas. What do you do with that, right? So there's no business plan. There's no, so it's like, okay, well, this is a pivot, and you can't say no. The universe gives you a gift and says, okay, what are you going to do with this gift? And so I'm going to be grateful for it, and I'm going to honor it and cherish it and keep it safe, and I'm going to love it and help it in any way I can. So we shifted into, okay, yeah, gifting socks at conferences is great fun and all of that, and helping support and acknowledge other nonprofits that are doing good things and amplifying their, yeah, that's great. But now we've got this, and what do we do with it? And what we did with it, we said, well, we're gonna love it, and we're gonna take care of it. We're gonna help continue the legacy of Ms. Blancas. We now have 33 schools in 9 states that are using pink socks as part of their teaching kindness curriculum, pre-K through 5, middle schools, high schools. We have 50 schools, 50 schools in the queue that want pink socks. And we're only bound by our ability to raise the money, because we gift the socks to the schools. And so as a nonprofit, I'm now raising money. It's kind of different, when I was been an entrepreneur in startups and going and pitching for VCs, and it's a different thing. And on this one, I say, well, the socks are $5 a pair. And what's the ROI on that in a little girl's life who gets her pink socks in the first grade and is being taught about all of those wonderful attributes about kindness and how to be a good human? What's the ROI on that? It's immeasurable. And her continuum of her lifetime, her family, her friends, her community, her state, the country, the world, us, for that $5, And so it's not about the money, right? And so we've been taking in donations. Like I say, we're a 501c3. We've got philanthropists, individual donations. We've got corporate sponsors who are friends of Pink Socks to help. We just at the end of last year, we got a very nice grant from the Heinz Foundation. Mm-hmm. And we have 2 grant writers now that are sending out grant proposals. And this is where I want to, that's the lead up. That's the backstory to what I want to talk about Niall, is those 5th graders at the first school, Dr. Sushik Elementary, the first graders are now 5th graders, and they're going to matriculate into a middle school that is also a Pink Sock school in El Paso. And those kids are going to matriculate into a high school that is also a Pink Sock school. So it's a continuum. It's a longitudinal study of, kindness, of what's the impact on these children's lives. Can it be measured? And the answer is, well, yes, because all the school districts each school has social workers on site. And if just one kid. It just takes that one kid to feel bullied, left out, ostracized, hurt. That one kid show up with a gun, right? And we went back to the original school this fall, and the fifth graders that were the original first graders had gifted the whole school, all the new students, their pink socks. And they're also taking pink socks to Uvalde, Texas, the scene of the last shooting tragedy in Texas, to gift those kids their pink socks. If we can prevent another school shooting, if we can prevent another middle school girl bullying another middle school girl so badly that she kills herself, what's that worth, right? And our current raise is $500,000 for those 50 schools that are in the queue. So it's 100,000 pairs of pink socks. What we really need is, and the NIH has some funding set aside for, because it's a national health crisis. I mean, it's in schools. The shooting, bullying, mental health, and Niall and I were talking downstairs, and he said, "Man, I've got all of this data, mental health data that we've just pulled." And I was like, "Ding, ding, ding." There's bound to be a way that we can mash up the data you have with the data that these schools are getting on the ground. Like, say, we're 4 years in now, and if we could, if I had the magic wand and I'd say, poof, I'd have a PI, principal investigator, that would take this and say, "I'm going to run this as my project, and let's study it for the next however many years, and track the efficacy of this of schools that are using pink socks to teach about kindness." They pick a day of the week. Most schools it's a Monday, and they all wear their socks back every week, and every class has a period teaching those attributes. So it's not a one-off thing. It's throughout the year. With a PI, then we really have somebody, or even somebody that's like, "I'm getting my PhD in early child development. I really don't know what to do my dissertation on." "Hey, we got one for you. Here it is. It's already just take it." That would really help us with the grant proposals. Really, because I don't have the damn nobody. There's no employees at Pink Sock Life. It's all volunteer and grassroots. So if we had somebody that knew what they were doing and could really take a hold of this, then it would really help us with the grant money. And then we could really, scaling this is just, it's all about money. I mean, we get the pink socks manufactured in Bangkok, Thailand, from the same manufacturer that makes Nike socks. Wire money, ship the socks right into the schools. It's totally streamlined, right?
Do you guys have a curriculum?
So
is there a specific curriculum that goes with this at the school? Is there like a kind of an intervention?
Yeah, so it's not our curriculum, but so the original school, Dr. Sushuk Elementary in El Paso, Christina Chavez, who's the principal there, is now on our board, and they created a curriculum there that she's packaged and bundled up, and has been sharing with other schools as they come online. So they'll have a Zoom call, and that's, "Okay, great, here's what we're doing," hand off the packet, and depending on the grade level, they have different exercises and art projects and all the things.
Because the question is, is the intervention just the socks, or the socks plus?
It seems like it's the socks plus the
Yes.
curriculum.
And then you need to identify a good control, and then you got your study.
But there's also, I wanted to flag for you that I read a study not too long ago, which I will try to find, about an anti-bullying curriculum that focused on influencers in the schools, like essentially the cool kids, right? And trying to get the influencers to disrupt bullying. Basically, kind of, in recognition of the fact that a lot of bullying is never going to be under the visible to the adults, right? It's like, it's always going to happen within the social hierarchy and world of the kids. I have a middle school daughter, and so that is top of mind.
Yeah.
This was I may be mixing two studies, but there was one that was a very long, maybe I'm mixing two, very long longitudinal study, like decades later, tracking the influence of bullying, and you've maybe seen this or something like it. So bullying and severe kind of ostracization within their social environment to health outcomes, to earnings, to suicidality. And so there's definitely a kind of baseline that that study is feasible, can be done, right? Like you can say what I think you're driving towards a little bit more of an education oriented intervention. It is interesting. Like from what I've heard, it's different than the sort of thinking about things in terms of disruption of bullying. You're thinking a little more in terms of like the other way around, like rather than saying don't bully, you're saying do be kind. And start from, hey, let's try to spread kindness and interact with others in a kind way.
Positive affirmation.
Right.
Yeah. So a good, I've been in schools where, well, let me just give this is a great example. So high schools.
Mm-hmm.
One of the high schools, also in El Paso, the soccer team, the men's soccer team, said the coach reached out and said, hey, I'd like to get 150 pairs of pink socks for all the boys on the team. So it's multiple grades, multiple teams. It's a big school. And we said, sure, great. So, and they look great. They're doing great posts and all the things, and we're celebrating them and all the good things. Got invited to come to. They built a new football field in school. Nice turf and all the things. The football team shares the field with the soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
So we're out there, the ribbon cutting ceremony. We're sitting up in the stands. Football team's on this side, soccer team's on this side. Soccer team's all wearing their pink socks. And, come on, it's high school, and I could feel the tension,
of course,
in the, the soccer guys in their pink socks, and here's the football jocks, right? And so there's a little of that. And so I was
Texas,
like,
but the football
in Texas is
football
big time football,
right?
It's big time football. So I reached out to the coach and said, hey, listen, the soccer coach, you get the football coach on board with getting the football boys to wear the. He's like, yes. So now we've got the football team, the coaches are wearing their pink socks, making the boys wear the size, teaching about kindness on and off the field, not bullying each other. And, these kindness pep rallies, when they go into schools, and I've seen this, the first time the high school sent the high school cheerleaders to an elementary school before they had pink socks, the high school, when the older girls would come in, they were like, I can't believe we're having to come do cheerleading at the elementary school. I'm over this. Now, since they have pink socks and they see, wait a minute, these little girls are looking up to me, and I've got some responsibility because I'm setting an example here. And they also know, oh wait, the little girls have pink socks. We have pink socks. We've got the same pink sock scrunchies in our hair, whether we're the seniors or whether you're a fifth grader. Same thing with the boys. They are also seeing, hey, and so the senior classes, they gift to the lower class. So the fifth grade gifts the fourth graders, the third graders to the second graders, et cetera. So it establishes this gifting bond, this relationship bond that says, I've got some responsibility coming up to me. So when the cheerleaders came in the next time, it was a whole different vibe, because they were like, oh, so now they're like big sisters, and the older girls were grooving on that relationship, and instead of being annoyed that they had to go to an elementary school. So there's all kinds of magic that's already, visible and tangible and happening with these schools that are using pink socks. But as it's growing, we really need somebody that could take it over, and that person could also manage and track the data over this longitudinal study, which would help us get more money from the grants and foundations. And maybe that person is watching. That's why I wanted to come up here and say that.
I will say, as the parent of a kid in high school, it's actually astonishing to me, the casual cruelty that is meted out and is considered like completely normal. My son plays lacrosse, and when he joined the team last year as so he was actually telling me about bullying that was going on in the locker room, and I'm like, well, that's bullying, and he was kind of like, no, that's life. And I'm like, did they try and do anything to you? And he's like, yeah, they did, and I just like decked somebody, and then they left me alone. It's just like complete like this is it's Lord of the Flies. I mean, this is
it's been normalized.
He actually didn't even view it as like we had this long conversation. I'm like, that's bullying. He's like, no, it's not. He's like, it's just how you get kind of like. I'm like, that's bullying, and it's almost hard for them to comprehend.
So why, just briefly.
And again, if you show like it's the classic thing. Like if you
show
show
weakness.
any weakness,
Yeah.
you're
in trouble.
you're screwed.
So that there has to be some connection to changes in society. Of course, the people who study this talk about that this is really the first generation that has grown up with iPhones the whole time.
Yeah.
They've never had not being fully connected.
Yeah.
And this is the major change. And there's, especially for young women, this is the kind of the new reality. And it's 5:10, so we should probably stop in 5 minutes and go to the reception. But in general, I really love the thing that I've always loved about, and I'm not on camera now, so forgive me for not setting up my camera right to have what I say. You can hear me, but you can't see me. But the thing I've always loved about Pink Socks is that the complexity of the lesson boils down to there are some things that can only be gifts. And you should recognize when you're getting those things, and you should recognize when it's your responsibility to give those things. And the lesson in healthcare is, sometimes people need things that they're not going to be able to pay for, and thinking about this just as a business is a problem. And I think that corresponding lesson in education is, you've felt lonely. Everyone's felt lonely. And this is another problem that can only be solved by the gift of generosity and everything else. So it's a beautiful intervention, and I really love the idea. But I also think there's some kind of change that's happening, because I was bullied a lot when I was a kid, but it's not like what you're describing, right?
Yeah.
And there is a change that's happening. And so I think the fact that the Pink Socks is a meme is part of the reason why it is successful. You're fighting fire with fire. There's something about that that's also happening. I'm not sure what it is, but I think that maybe perhaps if you were, giving me infinite money and time to solve this problem with data, I think one of the things that I would want to study is there is a virality to the Pink Socks idea that it seems like it's somewhat counteracting some of the viralities that are damaging.
Right.
Nick,
I have to.
So I mean,
guys,
it's
I have to go.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Bye. It's okay. Anyone else needs to too? I think we're going to stop in 5 minutes anyways.
Felt so inadequately bearded in my entire life.
Yeah, I'm really,
as I have felt
really,
in this
really.
room. So
Well, you are.
respect.
But the more important thing is to make you feel inadequate.
Nick,
That's what's
one
important.
thought that occurs to me, maybe you
Thank
guys
you,
have been talking
See
about
you later,
this,
Doc.
is I think hearing this, what can you guys do that puts the whole concept under the ownership of the young people? Because that's what Fred was saying made me think of that. What makes things viral is really that people own them, right? And what I think will end up making the young people buy in is when they own it.
Yeah.
Right.
So what we do when we have
So maybe it doesn't have to be Pink Sock. Maybe they have to be able to do things to the concept.
Yeah.
Right?
And so what happens at
So
these
that-
schools is they have the day they get their Pink Socks, they have a kindness pep rally. Right.
Mhm.
That's the day the kids gift each other their socks, and that's important, right? That the kids are gifting each other the socks. Teachers aren't giving them to them.
Mm-hmm.
We're not giving them to them. The school district's not giving them to them. They're giving them to each other. And so from the very get-go, they're in it, right? It's they're learning the ethos of gifting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really great book by a lady named Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a PhD botanist, biologist, upstate New York, Native American.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. Braiding Sweetgrass. It has some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever read on the act of gifting.
Mm-hmm.
Indigenous people here, it was all decommodified. It was all based on gifting, right? And there's a line from the book that says, the cardinal difference between commodity exchange and gifting is that gifting creates a relationship bond. And so it does. And so these children from the very beginning are learning they create a relationship bond with the person that they gifted their socks to and the person they received their socks from. And the curricula, as I understand it, for each grade, Pink Socks is just one tool in the toolbox.
Right.
It's not like they're teaching kindness only on Mondays.
Right.
Maybe it's Pink Socks on Monday. On Tuesday, it's the kindness rock. On Wednesday, it's the kindness T-shirt. On Thursday, it's the kindness something else. Right. So these schools and these teachers are teaching kids kindness every single day. So we're just grateful to be part of that toolbox and to help them in any way we can.
The reason, let me push back a little on the idea, well, it could be anything. I think the reason why Pink Socks works so well is that it just doesn't mean anything else. So it's just random enough that it can be about gifting completely. And there's really not very much in that space. There's not something else that you could say, well, we'll take this thing. And it's because so many ideas, and I think, we experience religions and we experience all kinds of different things. I think open source is a perfect example, by the way, of a really healthy gift culture, where you increase your status not by the money you've made or whether or not you've done something, but by the gifts you've given this community, right? And so there's other places where this happens, but I think Pink Socks just doesn't happen to mean anything else. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you have this kind of purity of idea where it's like, what is this? Well, let's look at the Pink Socks hashtag. There's nobody else doing something under the Pink Socks hashtag. It's random enough that it's just its own thing. It's got its own corner of real life and the internet both. Yeah. And so it can just be about gifting. And on stream people, we're going to stop soon because streams just shouldn't go forever. But and we've got to get to our next thing. But the thing that I love about Pink Socks, that I was, there's another stream. My first stream at Datapalooza was just by myself in the restaurant before they let me up into this room. And I did it on Pink Socks because that's what I had. I was like, we're going to talk about Pink Socks because this box of Pink Socks that I've been given, and it's, of course, I get a gift in the mail, a box of Pink Socks, and then I turn around and I give them out again. And I talked about this idea that there is a difference in gift culture. I don't think people understand the degree to which all technology works because of the gift culture of open source. Yeah. Like TCP/IP. Right. That came from this idea of rough consensus, working code. Let's try to get something working. And people have been working and everything we do online, the good stuff and the bad stuff, underneath is this community of people who decided that their values were not going to be rooted in the exchange of money or the commodities or whatever it is. So anyways, I just think it's a marvelous idea. I'm so incredibly happy to hear how it is translated into pediatric mental health / education context. That's amazing. But I also think that there is an element when we talk about open research in healthcare, the fact that, when the NIH funds money, that the research, the results has to be open. Open data, the idea that my work, if you want to know how the healthcare system works in the United States, open data is something that you can download. Your work at CMS, I hope you've already done, put something up online in your new role. I hope that you've been able to cross that threshold, but even if you haven't, the idea that there is code that is coming out that is healthcare related, that they're solving problems, and how much of the FHIR stuff is open source, and the standards are open source. One of the big things that we were just talking about earlier is that this FHIR standard is supposed to be the new way to exchange data. One big way that it is different from X12 and standards of the past is you can just go download the whole standard. And you may not be able to read it or understand it. I certainly can't. I can't read that whole thing and know what it means. But I can't even afford the X12 standard. I can't even start.
So because I haven't said much, I'm going to try and say a few things really quickly.
Sure.
The first one is that the thing that's special about open source is that software is a non-rival good with a marginal reproduction cost that asymptotically approaches zero.
Yes.
Right. So socks cost $5 to make. So if there was, some piece of intellectual property, some digital good that didn't cost money to produce, that could lower your initial cost, right? And so filters for profiles and graphics, releasing logos, Creative Commons art, sharing that art so that people can share it, because displaying the socks is a thing that helps to bring that signaling to the rest of the group that says, I'm a part of this. And I think there's a great parallel there. One of my favorite open source projects, and this is across tech, is that most technology is a negative feedback loop, where when you give feedback, it's always because something is broken, and no one ever gives feedback about the thing that stays running. Like, good job, the database didn't go down today. Here's a pat on the back, right? When it goes down, there's a lot of vitriol. So there's these negative reinforcement loops. So there's a project called Open Source Thank You Notes that came out, where the idea was that, hey, we should say thank you to the folks who are contributing and maintaining, because there's not a suggestion box for good news that's out there. So bringing more positive reinforcement into the maintainer community and recognizing those contributions is an important thing. And I see a lot of parallels between, the world is full of good and spread kindness and give, and like spreading that love and that maintainer love through the open source thank you cards. We need more of that pink sock energy inside of the open source world as well, and helping people to recognize that, that people are volunteering and giving these things is an important part of storytelling. I think a lot of the sort of second era here of, the internet is that in the beginning it was this like, I'm releasing this for free and we're putting out there to see what people can build on top of it. Well, now the mythology is like, well, you got to be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, and then you're guaranteed to make $1 billion because everybody's running your software. And I know plenty of software projects where they run half the websites on the internet, and all of their contributors and maintainers are not billionaires, and it's because they have billions of users across the planet that are using this thing for free to uplift everybody, right? So I love the idea of the project. Before this is done, like, I'm gonna reach in my pocket and, do my part individually to make sure that somebody else is gonna get a pair of socks on my behalf, because I didn't know about this until today. So if that's one thing about contributor culture, is that everybody can contribute something. So, everybody does their part and contributes where they can, then people can get these socks. And I think if there was an intangible piece of it that you could have and you could spread that would lower your contribution costs and your would lower that monetary barrier, so that you can spread that message and reach people online without having that tangible, that cost area.
You know what you might do?
Yeah, we share all the artwork. I mean, so
Cool.
that when we designed the logo with the mustache, and he looked and said, well, can we trademark or copyright it? No, you can't, which is great. And so I just say, look, here's the file, go make shirts, hats, whatever you want.
One lesson of open source, actually, we should. It's such a fascinating conversation. We all should.
I know. I'm trying not to start talking about NFTs.
But it's like, well,
that's all.
The interesting thing about open source is what they realized is you need to use copyright to undo copyright.
Yeah.
So you might think about doing something where you use trademark to undo that. You know what the company is that's done the best job of that with trademark? Sriracha. Like, I bought this shirt from Target. You know why I bought this shirt from Target? Because this company does not trademark in a way that prevents their mark from being used on other things. They just want it for hot sauces. So this is as close as you can get to an open source for trademark thing. And as a result, I'm walking around advertising Sriracha.
They're hot sauce,
right. So that's the net result of it. So I think there is a kernel. I don't even know if you should do this, right? But it's almost not the point. The point is, what open source figured out, what makes it amazing is that maybe this whole framework of thinking that was designed to allow authors to ensure that copies were not made of their work, maybe we could use that paradigm to ensure that copies were made of our work, right?
Yes.
And so it's one of those things where somebody just takes gravity and turns it upside down. And I definitely think that there's some kernel, which we should talk about and think about more. There's a relationship between the kind of ideals of open source, which open source doesn't always meet its ideals. I think Linus Torvalds could probably do with some bullying training, probably. But nonetheless,
get a pair of things.
Maybe that's exactly what he needs.
He needs a pair of them.
So, but nonetheless, I think there is a kernel of idea, a relationship there. And the same thing with open data and our work, publishing things and trying to make people's lives better. As I said to all of the streamers, like, this is one of the best conversations I've ever had. Thank you so much for coming up here. Especially you had no idea what you're getting yourself into. No clue. Right. You came up and you were here to say one sentence. You walked into something. I had no idea what was going to happen either. So that's how it goes. So I'm going to go press stop on the thing. But thank you, streamers, for I guess
Cheers.
thank you, and thank you to the world for listening. No matter when you're listening, we really appreciate it. Love you all.
Love you. Yeah. Good seeing you guys.
Yeah, it was really nice to meet you. I mean, you didn't say very much, but you really spoke. It was great.